welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today we're going to talk about the importance of advance directives. I know. Stay with me here, okay? This is one of those icky topics nobody likes to talk about, and this is one of those things that I am endlessly talking about. I bring it up so many times on this podcast. I have had people I've guested talk about this. I just cannot shut up about the importance enough of having your advance directives in order. But I thought I would take an entire episode to just kind of expand on what I mean by that, why this is so important, and how to do this correctly and in the best manner for you specifically. Okay? All right. Bear with me. I'm going to try to keep this as light as I can. You know me. I don't like to get things too heavy, and I don't like to make things too boring. So I just want to make this informational and get you inspired to do this if you haven't already, because that's always my goal. All right. Before we dive into that, as always, if you go on over to patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula, you can, for as little as $1 a month, you can support me in providing pro bono work to those who cannot afford my services. You get access to this podcast a week early. You can get videos to some of my podcasts, mostly just the interviews. I don't really record my own. It feels weird to just make a video of myself talking into the microphone. I know a lot of people do that. I find it a little weird. I don't know, not my cup of tea. So you're not going to see any videos of me just by myself talking into my microphone. But you can see my interviews with guests. You get access, like I said, a week early. Grief affirmations, Q&As, other bonus content. There's also some free content. All the stuff I had on social media, I've moved over to Patreon now, and those things are available to the public at no cost. So you can still check that out over there. Patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. All right, so let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about advance directives, shall we? Okay, so first of all, why is this so important? Why does this matter? And why am I constantly asking you to do your advance directives or asking you if you've done them yet? Why is this such an important thing? Well, there's the obvious things of, what's going to happen to your stuff after you're gone. Although that's not really part of what I call advance directives. Your advance directives are more things like your living will, financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, post, DNR, rotor. I'm going to get into what all these are, so don't worry about it. But these are those type of things. Your final will, the what happens to your stuff after you're gone, it can be included in this paperwork. A lot of people keep all that stuff together. My final will is with my advance directives, but this is more for if you're still alive, but maybe won't be for very long. Or anyway, we'll get into that. But why is this so important? Well, there's the obvious of what if you can't make financial or medical decisions? Who will do that? Like if you were hit by a car and you're in a medically induced coma, you are now in a persistent vegetative state, you have dementia or Alzheimer's or a brain injury or anything that makes you incapable of making medical and financial decisions. Who is going to do that for you? Because if there's nobody, the medical team is going to shrug their shoulders and do the best they can, and they will do everything they can to save your life because that is what they are trained to do. That is part of the Hippocratic Oath. They will continue to keep you alive as long as possible. And if that's not something you want, you need to have this living will in place, or you need to have a power of attorney and have somebody who can step in and say, no, that's not what they want. Here is what they want. Another huge important part of this can so help avoid family conflicts by having clear, fully fleshed out, legally binding documents. I would love to think that every family in the world would just honor each other and do what's best, but let's face it, not all do. And even that aside, if it's a tragic and unexpected event, like me, I'm 47, very healthy. If something were to happen to me tomorrow or today, It would obviously be tragic and very sudden to my family because I currently have no diagnoses of any life-limiting illnesses. I am not elderly. It would be very traumatic, and I don't know, like, how would my family cope with that? This would be so hard for them because they would be so, I'm assuming that they would be bereft and they would be hurting right now because, something's wrong with me and I might not survive. I would assume that this would be a very difficult time for them. And for them to have to then try to make all these decisions about what to do is just that much more difficult. Grief really clouds your judgment. And this is just true of almost everyone. And you might have, mom's in a coma, mom is not responsive anymore. Dad wants this, one kid wants this, third kid wants this, and now they're all fighting because none of them can agree on what they want. But if mom has a legally binding document that says this is what mom wants, they might still fight. Like, not much you can do about that, but mom will get what she wanted. So taking that emotional and ethical burden out of your loved one's hands so that they can just grieve and be with you in those final moments is the most amazing gift you can give somebody. And I can't emphasize enough that even if you are young and healthy, get this stuff done because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. I've told this story on the podcast a few times now about a coworker I had. He was in his 30s and he had an undiagnosed heart condition and he died very suddenly and left behind 2 young children and a wife. He was not expecting that. Of course he wasn't. So anything can happen, right? None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is that you might think, yeah, I'm not going to have to worry about that for 20 years. You don't know that. This is my hill to die on, people. I'm up here. Okay, so let's talk briefly about what the advanced directive forms include. So I already talked about the living will. So the living will is the document outlining what medical treatments you do or do not want. So let's say you are unresponsive or just unable to make decisions, but you are in a persistent vegetative state, no hope of recovery. Do you want a feeding tube? Do you want to be on a respirator? Do you want to have CPR performed on you? Whether you do or you don't is your choice. This is where you can make that choice known. And I will say, anywhere you go, living will is top of the line. So if your living will spells, I'll get into medical power of attorney in 1 second, but if you have a medical power of attorney that is saying something different than what your living will says, it's going to be very difficult for them to make that call. Who knows? Anything can happen. They can fight this, but doctors, hospitals typically will almost always go with just the living will. Again, things always slip through the cracks, right? But they're supposed to follow the living will above everything else because that is what that person decided while they were still able. So this is just outlining what you are and are not comfortable with as far as feeding tubes. And this can even go not necessarily like you're going to die in the next few days, but you're just in a coma and you might be in a coma for a while and it could be permanent. Do you want a feeding tube? Do you just want nature to take its course? These are things, and you can say one or the other. You can say, I'm down with a respirator, but I don't want a feeding tube, or vice versa. This is your chance to spell it all out, and you can fill in exactly what you want. So do that. So then you have your medical power of attorney, which is where you choose somebody to make health care decisions on your behalf if you are incapacitated. And it's financial power of attorney is similar situation. You're just choosing somebody that can pay your bills for you, have access to your bank accounts, and manage any of your financial affairs when you cannot. So here's the thing with these two things. When you choose somebody to be your medical or financial power of attorney, obviously, first and foremost, choose somebody you trust. Obviously. Second, make sure they know that they are your power of attorney and that they are okay with it. And third, make sure they understand what you want and they will honor it. Okay, so that ties into the fourth thing then. Choose somebody you think can make these decisions without changing their mind, without being too involved in the emotional aspect. They might have an emotional bond to you, but choose somebody you think can handle making those decisions in a chaotic and very emotionally heated environment, right? For example, I'll use myself as an example. I would not put my mother as my healthcare power of attorney right now. She is still living. She is of sound mind and body. She can make decisions, but I don't want to put that on her because I'm her only surviving child, and I can't picture her trying to make these decisions, knowing that her last surviving child might be gone. So my husband is my power of attorney, but you don't have to pick your spouse. You don't have to pick a child. You don't have to pick a parent. You don't have to pick a family member at all. You can pick your next door neighbor or your best friend. You can choose your barista. Just remembering those things. You trust them. They know that they're your power of attorney. They know what you want, and they can make that decision when the time comes, if the time comes. Okay? So, next form of advanced directive is your do not resuscitate order and POLST, which is POLST, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. So these are a little different. These typically are not a form you fill out. This is something that you and your doctor agree to. If you are receiving treatment for a certain illness, certain diagnosis, let them know that you would like to have this. They'll have that in your medical file, so that if you are brought in somewhere, they will not perform CPR. They won't give you any type of life-sustaining treatment. So it's very similar to a living will. It's just flat up stating, I don't want resuscitated. I don't want CPR. And I've brought that up on here before. CPR is very, very, very traumatic on the body. And the chances of it actually not just saving your life, but having you come back to a full and complete recovery are actually very low. A lot of people don't know that, and it's sad and scary and true, and medical professionals will tell you this too. Yes, CPR can absolutely save a life. Always do it if it is needed. If you see somebody on the street, give them CPR, unless they're clutching a DNR order to their chest. CPR can save a life, but it is... Think about your 85-year-old grandmother with Parkinson's, what that CPR will do to her body and for what. So that's her call. If she would like to have CPR, obviously, honor that. But just make sure if you have a do not resuscitate order, your doctors have it, put it in your MyChart. If you have a MyChart account, upload it there. Put a copy on your refrigerator. I think I've mentioned this on here before. This is where first responders are trained to look, is the refrigerator. I know that sounds weird, but that is where they're trained to look. Put it on your refrigerator. Make sure friends and family may have copies if you have a DNR. Okay? DNRs, I'm not exactly saying go get one if you're young and healthy. This is more for people who may have a life-limiting illness that they don't want to have somebody call 911 because they're at that point where they've accepted that they're going to die soon. I'm not going to have a DNR. That would be silly. So, okay. Last form I mentioned, this is one I only recently learned about, and this is specific to Ohio, but I'm quite sure there are other states where this is an issue as well. It is the RODOR, or Right of Disposition of Remains, RODOR. So what this does is this is kind of like that power of attorney where you grant somebody the power to have control of what happens to your remains after you die. Why is this necessary? The example I was given was by a funeral director who said they have seen this happen many times. It's a man and wife. They have 3 kids. They grow up. Mom dies. Dad remarries. Somebody younger, whatever. But this is the specific example they gave. Dad remarried somebody much younger than him, and he died very shortly after the marriage. And he had bought a family plot for him and his former wife and for their kids so they could all be together in this family plot. The new wife said, no, I don't want him buried there. He's going to be buried with me. I've bought a new plot and that's where he will go. And they can't do anything about it. In the state of Ohio, the way right of survivorship goes is spouse is always first, no matter what. The kids couldn't even step in. There was nothing they could do. And the funeral home, they couldn't do anything about it either. They were siding with the kids. They felt terrible. They were like, can't do anything about it. So, but in the state of Ohio, you can fill out a right of disposition of remains, which is give somebody so that had that man known about it, he could have had one of his kids be that. So then the kids could say, nope, dad's going in the family plot. So check in your state to see if that's applicable. If there's something like that, check out what the right of survivorship chain is in your state. That is another important thing to do, is to find out who gets claim over whatever first, right? Because like I said, in the state of Ohio, it's spouse first always. Then I believe it's child, parent, sibling. I'd have to look it up again. I don't quite remember, but yeah. So just look that up in your state. See if you need one of those. So now you have all of these forms. You have them filled out, ready to go. You are flying high with the pride of getting this paperwork done. What do you do with these forms? First of all, make sure it is legally binding and official. This is going to vary by state. In the state of Ohio, these forms only need to be notarized or witnessed by 2 non-family witnesses. So I can fill out a living will and have 2 of my neighbors witness me signing it, and they sign it, or I can go have it notarized. So check in your state, because it will be different. And this where you can find the forms too. Just, I swear to God, you just hop on Google and say Advanced Directives, West Virginia, and it will pop up with something. If you want them, I'll put the link in the show notes for the ones for Ohio. So if you live in Ohio, I will have those for you. Because there's one packet I always send everybody. It's amazing. It's got all the forms in there and explains what all of them are. Guardianship is in there too, which is something I'm not really going to get into because that's not really part of this conversation. But make sure that you have them legally bounded. Make sure they're legally binding. Just make sure you've done it correctly. Now, on top of that, don't just write something on a napkin. That will never hold up in court. So, what do you do with the forms? You've got them notarized too. Good for you. High five. Now what? First of all, keep the original copies. Let people know where they are. Don't lock them up in a safe where nobody can access them but you, because that will do nobody any good. Put them in a file folder. Put them in a safe deposit box, but make sure somebody knows where the key is. Whatever you want to do with them, just make sure they are available, okay? Make copies. Give copies to your family members. Give copies to your barista. No, don't do that. Give copies to people you trust, that whoever your power of attorney is, you better make darn sure they have a copy of it, because they're going to be the one running into the bank going, I need access to their account to pay for their medical bills right now. Here is the form. Give copies to the power of attorney. Give copies to whomever you might think would like one. Upload them somewhere on a virtual. I have mine in a Dropbox folder that is shareable to my family. So anyone in my family has that login. They can get in there and get those documents. And I just re-upload as I change them, which I haven't. More on that in a second. If you have a MyChart account, in the state of Ohio, we have OSU, we have Ohio Health, and I think there might be a third one, but MyChart's not like that rare. I think most states have their version. Most hospital systems have their version of MyChart. I have one for my doctor's office, like Greater thing has anyway. You probably have a portal somewhere, a patient portal. I guarantee you there's a place in there you can upload it. Upload it there. If you don't, take a copy to your doctor's office. Any medical professional you're interacting with, take it to them, give them a copy. They'll put it in your file. But if you have this MyChart, make sure it's there, because that's what's going to be checked if you are ever rushed into a hospital without anybody with you, or you're out on the street or something and you're rushed into a hospital. They'll find it there quicker than calling all around trying to find people. So that's a good place to put that. Now, what if you change your mind? Let's say your best friend is your medical power of attorney, and 2 years down the road, they have an affair with your husband, or you have a falling out and they're no longer your best friend. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that happened. Rewrite it. All you have to do is fill out a new form with the current date, have that notarized, and again, just make sure people have the new copy. So even if that friend you don't like anymore comes to the hospital with their power of attorney form, or your bank, and they're like, look, I'm the power of attorney, and somebody else comes in and has one that's more recently dated, guess which one they're going to go with? Yes, I'm not saying things can't happen. There's always exceptions to every rule. There's always gray areas, but it is very, very difficult for them to get access if there's a newer version. So just go through the process again. I always encourage people, go through your advance directives every 5 years. Just look at them, make sure everything is still good, everything is still current. And if it is, great. If not, redo them. So that is my spiel. So just to kind of sum everything up nice and neat, just do your daggone advance directives. If you don't, this can delay medical care. This can go to lengthy and obnoxious and very expensive court battles. This can cause family disputes that are completely unnecessary and can just upset everything. This can absolutely take away your dignity and your control when you are no longer able to speak for yourself. This isn't about being morbid. This is about your dignity and easing burdens on your loved ones. This is also a difficult conversation. I understand not everybody wants to talk about these things, but you need to, okay? These are hard conversations to have. Try speaking with somebody like me, like call a death doula or somebody, talk to an estate attorney. They're obviously used to having this conversation all day long, so they're okay with it. Talk to them about it and get the right information. And once you have talked about it a couple times to people you can trust, it's easier to start having these conversations with your loved ones. But I cannot emphasize how important it is. I've had whole podcasts on that too, like why it's so important to talk about these things with your loved ones. So do that. Okay, that is it. I'm going to stop preaching. I got real amped up on this one. But can't help it. I'm passionate about it. But since we are now at the end of the episode, you know what time it is, folks. It is time for the Death Deck. Woo. All right. Whoop. Every time I drop one. Okay, I'm going to shuffle that up. And I'm going to, I'm going to pick up the one I dropped because it's face down. And we have, oh my gosh, how flippin' perfect is this? Okay, and this is actually something I didn't bring up. I'll read the question first. Organ donation is A, a real chance to save a life. I'm totally in. B, a thought I've been carrying around in my head but have yet to put into writing. Or C, on the off chance I need them afterwards, I just can't do it. So, organ donation. I didn't bring that up. That is, at least in the packet I have for the forms for Ohio, that's in there. I think it's in with the living will. There's a whole section on organ donation, and you can even choose what you're comfortable donating. Bone marrow, eyes, skin tissue, and then all the vital organs. And it just kind of lists skin. Did I say skin? I don't know. All the different things you can donate. You can check one and not the other. So you can kind of pick and choose what you are comfortable donating. But that is part of Advance Directive 2. Most places will just ask you this at the BMV when you fill your driver's license out. And they'll put it right on your driver's license. That's how it is in the state of Ohio. It'll specifically say if you're an organ donor or not. So I am. Please feel free to use them. If I'm dead, I don't need them. But that's not to poo-poo on anybody who is not comfortable with organ donation. That is your choice. If you do not want to donate your organs, you do not have to. And if that is, I know there's some religions that are, you can't donate your organs, you have to be buried whole. And that is fine. I would never sneer at anybody for that decision. So if you don't want to be an organ donor, you don't have to. Okay? So says I. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I would love to hear your answer to the Death Deck. Are you an organ donor? Do you have your advance directives done? You had better? I would like to know. You can find me on my website, nikkithedeathdoula.com. You can also find me at patreon.com/nikkithedeathdoula. You can find me on my Caregivers United group. All my stuff I have linked in the link tree in the description. Please check that out. I love to hear from my listeners, so please reach out. If you have a topic idea for the show, or if you have a story of grief you'd like to share, let me know. I'd be happy to have you on the show. So that is all. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, remember, Your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck. Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula is produced by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC in Columbus, Ohio. Nikki the Death Doula LLC is for consulting, education, emotional support, and guidance, and is no way considered a funeral establishment or licensed mental health establishment. Scripts, editing, sound design, literally everything with this podcast is done solely by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC, with the exception of the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. Licensing information can be found at filmmusic.io.